Oh, thank you, Stephen, and good morning. It's fantastic to be here in Vancouver. And, you know, we have so much to kind of learn from each other. You know, we may be different systems and we may be on different sides of the Atlantic, but actually a lot of the challenges that we face are the same, and I think that many of the answers are the same. So what I'd like to do this morning is to share with you, I think, an increasingly important perspective in our improvement work in the National Health Service in England. And like Stephen says, we have some very, very big challenges in our system. I mean, we've just come through, 13 years of transformation. I mean, when I look at where we were, as a system, how people waited in our system, how poor our outcomes were around some of the big killer diseases like cancer and heart disease, and how different our system is now. I mean, basically in our system, people don't wait anymore. People used to wait, but they don't wait. And whilst we've still got some way to go, all the indications are that our rate of improvement around some of the major cancers, around heart disease, is greater than in other places. But then, the recession comes along and wallops us in the face. So, we have a situation now where we have a very, very significant financial gap going forward. And the changes that we've got to make, the rate, the pace, the scale of change that is required in our system is unprecedented, okay, in any healthcare system anywhere in the world. No healthcare system has ever achieved the rate of change that we have to make in the next 4 or 5 years. So I want to talk to you this morning about a really critical topic when it comes to reducing costs and improving quality. And it's the topic of organisational energy. And my inspiration for the title of this comes from this quote from Lauren Schwartz. And, when we look at organisations, when we look at leaders who have been able to truly deliver transformational change at scale, what they've been able to do is to ignite massive energy for change, okay? And in the world of, organisational performance, it's our ability to create that energy, okay, that actually fuels high performance. It isn't the extent to which we have time to do it, or even the extent to which we have the resources to do it. It's about the energy, okay, that we can ignite, that we can create in our organisation. So what I'd like to do in the next hour is to share some ideas, some opinions, and some insights around energy. So, I'd say that when we look at our leadership tasks moving forward, in our era of quality and cost improvement, okay, the challenge you have in Canada might not be as significant or stark, at least in the short term. Okay, it's still there. I think is a very big issue, and we have to be able to manage our own energies and those of the people around us. And I think that something different has happened in our world, because in the past, when we worked in health and healthcare, sometimes we had more resources and sometimes we had less resources, but it was a cycle and we got more resources again. When we look forward in our system in Britain, and I think the same is the case in Canada, the years of plenty are a very long way off. Okay? Like when I look at the projections that our Treasury is making in England, I mean, at the moment, we're in a situation where we have to make a 4% saving every year for 4 years, okay? Compound. And there's, like I say, there's no health system in the world that has made a 4% reduction year on year for 4 years, okay? That only takes us up to 2014, 2015. When we look forward and we look at 2020 and beyond, it's potentially a similar level of saving. So, what I'd say, one of the most important things that we have to be able to do as leaders of healthcare, and particularly as leaders of improvement in health and healthcare, is to manage that energy. So, we're going to talk this morning, or I'm going to talk, and you're going to hopefully enjoy it and be inspired by it, is organisational energy. So I thought, you know, like Stephen, I'm a bit of a fake academic as well. So I thought we should maybe start with the definition. This comes from some great authors, Bruce and Vogel, who are people who have done a lot of research, write very well, very useful frameworks around organisational energy. But it basically is the extent to which we, as leaders in our organisations or in the broader healthcare system, are able to kind of to put these things in place, to activate things that enable, you know, the potential of the people in our system to be met. And, you know, one of the things that I feel about health and healthcare is that, you know, we've got one of the brightest, okay, we've got one of the most value-driven workforces in any sector. So we have so much potential energy, and yet often we don't use it. So in a sense, what can we do to activate, okay, the forces of our people? Okay, our workforce, our service users, families, broader communities, towards our goals. So, you know, why is this energy issue important? I think it's true in BC in the same way as it is in England. That the kind of change efforts that we need over the next period, you know, aren't just small incremental changes. Okay, we know when we look at the issues that face us, how our systems need to change, how our performance as a health and healthcare system needs to change. You know, we're not talking about small-scale change. We are talking about very large changes. I think when we look 20 years' time, when we look back, the health and healthcare system that we see will be very, very different to what we have today. So we have to deliver large-scale change. Okay, when we look at the reality of what happens when leaders initiate large-scale change. Okay? What is the typical outcome? And this is right across sectors. The results are pretty consistent. You know, whether we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education, we're talking about the corporate sector. Okay? The results are pretty consistent. Okay? When we initiate large-scale change, okay, in order of frequency, the thing that is most likely to happen to our large-scale change effort is that it fizzles out, okay? That we start the change with, you know, full of ideas, full of energy, you know, full of possibility. But the reality is that large-scale change is really hard. And typically it runs out of energy. So, you know, think that energy word, really important. The second thing that happens is we get so far with the change, okay, we're able to put some good changes in place, but it hits a plateau. And because we're not attracting new supporters, new energy to that change, it kind of stays where it is. And the least likely thing that will happen is actually the thing that we want to happen, which is that the change becomes well established, lots of things happen across the system at lots of different levels to enable the change, you know, to become embedded and to become sustained, okay? So it seems to me, just even looking at that statement there about what happens around large-scale change, I think you get a sense of how critical this issue of energy is. Now, one of the models that we use a lot when we're thinking about large-scale change, that I think is very helpful, okay, is to contrast an anatomical approach to change or improvement with a physiological one, okay? When I went to improvement school in the NHS, which was a very long time ago, okay, what I was basically taught was an anatomical approach to improvement. Okay? And you know what I'd say about this? You know, anatomical change is really important, but it probably isn't enough. Okay? So when we talk about, you know, an anatomical approach to change, what we're talking about is how do we redesign the way that care is delivered? You know, how do we change the structures? How do we change the processes? You know, in order to deliver more effective health and healthcare. So when we have an anatomical focus, our leadership activities are about measuring metrics, baselines, evidence. How can we fundamentally improve the clinical systems that we're delivering? How can we reduce waste and unwarranted variation in our system? How can we fundamentally redesign pathways of care? Okay? Really important activities. And I probably spent my first 10 years as an improvement leader in the NHS very focused on those activities. But, you know, when we look across the world and we see those leaders, those organisations, those social movements, okay, that have delivered change at scale, really made a difference, what we see time and time again is a big, big focus on the physiology of change. And again, when we talk about physiology, you know, lifeblood, the life-giving forces that enable the system that we're part of and the people within it, or the people it serves, to develop and to grow and to change. So our focus, you know, when we think about the physiology of change, is that magic word, energy, okay? Energy as a fuel for change. And when we're thinking physiologically, or when we're planning the physiological aspects of our large-scale change effort, the activities that we're involved in are quite different. It's about, you know, creating a higher purpose, okay, a sense of shared meaning, a deeper meaning for the change process. You know, why are we doing this? Okay, what are we trying to achieve? It's about building commitment to change and to that shared purpose. It's about connecting with values, you know, the things that are in our hearts, the reasons why we do the jobs that we do in the first place. It's about creating a sense of hope and optimism, you know, a picture of the future that everybody will feel confident to move towards. And it's about calling people to action. And what I'd say about anatomy and physiology of change, it isn't either or, okay? We need to have both, okay? How many of you have received training in the anatomy of change? So, you know, how to redesign processes, you know, how to make care safer, okay? Quite a lot of you. How many of you have received training in the physiology of change? Okay? A lot less. And that's what we typically see. In improvement, we tend to focus on the anatomy and we don't focus on the physiology as much. And yet, if we're to create change at scale and we're to sustain that, we really need to focus on the physiology. Okay, let's take this a step further. This is a quote from a guy called Edgar Schein, and he is a kind of guru on organisational development. And he says, you can't impose anything on anyone and expect them to be committed to it. Somebody ought to have told our government about that 13 years ago, you know, when we've just been through such a process in terms of top-down national targets, you know, access targets, wait time targets, cancer targets, heart disease targets, mental health targets, stroke targets, okay? And I think one way that's very helpful to think about this is to contrast an approach to change that is based on compliance with an approach to change that is based on commitment. And certainly in our system, in the National Health Service in England, we've had a big focus on compliance, okay? So, you know, let's talk about compliance and what that means, how we create change through compliance, okay? We say this is the minimum performance standard or the national target or the provincial target that everyone must achieve. We coordinate and we control the change process because we use hierarchy, we use performance management systems, and we use standardization. And the thing about an approach to change that's based on compliance is that if we do not comply, there are consequences, okay? Which often it's like the threat of a financial penalty, okay, if the health authority or the organisation does not hit the goal, okay? Sanctions, you know, we take money away, or shame, you know, you as a leader did not deliver this, okay? And it creates a certain momentum for delivery, it can be said, okay? Let's compare that with commitment. Okay, when we talk about a commitment-based approach to change, we start from a very different place. Because what we say is, this is the collective goal that we want to achieve here, you know? And it's something, it's a sense of shared purpose. You know, everybody, whoever we do, whatever we do, whoever we are, we can all aspire to that same thing. You know, whether we're the chief executive, the medical director, if we're a service user, a community leader, you know, that's our goal. And we coordinate and control because we do have a shared goal. We have shared values, you know, it's not us and them, it's us and us. And a shared sense of purpose. And we create energy, that energy word's back again, okay, for delivery because we have commitment to a common purpose. Again, of course in a healthcare system we will always have compliance and we will always need compliance. Because if we're going to have high quality safe systems, you know, we need to have compliance in place. However, there isn't really any evidence from anywhere in the world about large-scale change being delivered and sustained through compliance. Okay? The world doesn't work that way. Okay? Okay? The reality is, those leaders who have truly changed the world, who have turned their organisations around, who have transformed the way that care is delivered, or do it consistently on the basis of commitment. So, you know, we need to be thinking about that moving forward. Okay, let's talk about energy. Okay, let's go back. And, you know, there's lots of different models and frameworks and evidence bases for thinking about energy. And what I've extracted for you this morning are a few of my favourite ones, okay, that kind of make sense to me. And this particular model, it's called the 4 Cs. And it comes from a company called Stanton Maris. And what they do is that they help organisations to assess their level of organisational energy, and if their organisational energy is low, they help them to improve it. And what Stanton Maris says is that if you look at an organisation, whether it's a healthcare organisation or any other kind of organisation, there's 4 sources of energy. Okay, there's 4 energy generators. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take you through these, and then I'm going to get you to think about them in your own organisation. So these are the 4 generators of energy in organisations. So the first C is about connection. And what that's about is how I as an individual can see a profound connection between my values, what matters to me, why I do the job I do, and the extent to which it's connected to, aligned with the organisational goals. Okay? How do I feel, to what extent do I feel connected to what this organisation is about? Okay? The second C is content. And what that says is, in terms of what I do every day, okay, you know, in what I do every day, to what extent do I enjoy it, and I'm fulfilled by it, and challenged by it, and it helps me to grow and develop, okay? The third C is context. And context is about the actual things the organisation does and the way that it operates, okay? And so it's like the physical conditions that I work in, but also it's about, you know, processes and procedures, you know, the extent to which they support me and help me, or the extent to which they get in the way. And context, okay, which is about the particulars of how the organisation operates, what it does, okay, compared to climate. And climate is kind of, is more ethereal, you know. It's how, you know, the way we do things around here, okay. And the extent to which, you know, this organisation operates, and the way that we do things, our culture, if you like, encourages individuals and teams to do their best. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to have a conversation on your table. And what I want you to talk about is, looking at these 4 Cs, which one do you think generates the most energy for the healthcare workforce? Okay, so which of these 4, you know, in your organisation, okay, is really generating energy for change? And then, but what I also want you to do is to look at those 4 and say, which of these, okay, when it's not working well, is the most energy sapping for people that work in healthcare? So I'm going to give you 4 minutes. Have a conversation on your table. Say hello to the other people on your table if you haven't done already. And come up with an answer to both those questions. Right, over to you. We've done this assessment with well over 1,000 different people that work in healthcare, and the answers are absolutely consistent, okay? But we've done it properly, you know, using the assessment tools that Stanton Maris give us. So let's see if your answers are similar to the English ones. Okay, so let's start off. Which of these 4 Cs generates the most energy for the healthcare workforce? Okay, so like when I say the one that you think it is, like just stick your hand in the air, okay, as a whole table. Okay, so, okay, let's see this. So, okay, which of the 4 Cs generates the most energy for the healthcare workforce? Who thinks it's connection? Okay, most of you. Who thinks it's content? Okay, a few. Who thinks it's context? Okay, not many. And who thinks it's climate? Okay, so connection's way ahead, and then content and climate are kind of a long way behind, but equal second, and context is last. Okay, very good. Okay, same as England. It's absolutely, okay, It's that sense of connection, you know, with a bigger purpose, what our health systems are there for, that absolutely creates the most energy for change. So we need to remember that, you know, when we're thinking about our healthcare improvement efforts, you know, the extent to which we're really getting those messages across that connect with that higher purpose. Okay, which C is the most energy sapping? So we're not going to say connection because we know that that's the most generating. Okay, so let's see which of the other three are the most sapping. Who thinks where it doesn't work right, who thinks that content is the most sapping? Okay, not many of you. Who thinks context? Okay, about half of you. And who thinks climate? Okay, well that's interesting. Because actually, when you look at this in England, and when it's been done across the world with the healthcare workforce as well, obviously BC's different. Yeah. It's actually context, okay? And it's about, you know, organisations that put in stupid bureaucratic rules, you know, that get in the way, like crazy systems that make us sweat the small stuff and not do the things that we actually want to do. So let's just bear that in mind anyway. Very good. So, last week I got to spend an hour and a half one-to-one with Don Berwick when he was in England, and it was just wonderful. And what was really interesting was that Don was talking to me about, you know, the 18 months that he has just spent in the USA managing the Medicare and Medicaid system. And, you know, what was really interesting to me was that the conversation that I was having with Don about what mattered and what he'd learned and where we needed to go moving forward, it was almost a totally physiological conversation. You know, we talked about joy at work, we talked about shared purpose, you know, we talked about deeper meaning. And this was a lovely quote that Don gave me, you know, the source of energy at work is not in control. You know, how do we make people do the things they want to do? It is in connection to purpose. Okay. This is from our work around at the NHS Institute around leading large-scale change. Okay, you know, learning from across multiple sectors. Okay, large-scale change is fueled by the passion that comes from the fundamental belief that there is something very different and better that is worth striving for. What does that tell us? If we want people to engage in large-scale change, whether we're talking about service users or families or communities or our workforce, we've got to get across the message in our large-scale change that actually the reason that there is meaning, okay, in what we're doing, because unless people believe that the change that we are trying to create, okay, is a better outcome than staying with the status quo, we are not going to create the change that we need. Now, this is really interesting. This is absolutely hot off the press. Okay, this comes from a Swedish researcher called Ann-Charlotte Norman, and she's been doing some really interesting qualitative research, and it's discursive studies. Okay, and what this means is that as a researcher, she's gone in and listened to lots of healthcare teams talking about you know, what they're doing, about improvement and what matters to them. And what's interesting is that she said the majority of their time listening in to these team conversations, you know, the teams are talking about money and about markets and targets, okay? But the reality from those conversations is that money incentives do not create energy for change, okay? What creates the energy for change is that, again, that connection to meaningful goals. And again, in our system, you know, a huge amount of energy and effort is going into kind of motivating payment systems. You know, that if we can change the payment system and we can do, reward payments for quality, you know, as if that will create energy for change. When actually, the real energy for change is around that connection with higher purpose. And again, there's a broader science here. And the word that gets used technically is discretionary effort, okay? And the evidence is really clear. What it tells us is that where people feel connected to their organisations and its goals and feel they're playing their part towards that, they will typically do 30 to 40% more work than people that don't feel engaged. So when we're talking about, you know, we need to increase the productivity of the healthcare workforce, you know, like one of the most effective strategies for doing that is making that connection to bigger purpose. Because work's contractual. You know, I do what I have to do, okay? But actually, effort's personal. You know, I can choose how much effort I put in or not. And you know, people put more and more effort in when they feel that engagement. Now, here's another framework about energy, and which I think is very, very useful in our context. And this comes from a guy called Steve Radcliffe, but there's lots of people that are using similar frameworks. And he says, when you look in organisations at sources of energy, where does the energy actually come from? That as leaders, we need to be building 4 different kinds of energy, and we need them all. So the first one he calls here is intellectual energy. And this is the kind of energy that comes from rational, logical thinking, being scientific. Okay? Randomised controlled trials are very much intellectual energy. Okay? And many of our large-scale planning efforts are driven by intellectual energy, key performance indicators, goals, and so on. The second kind of energy he calls emotional energy, and this is the kind of energy that is about when we come together as a team with a common purpose. Okay? It's about partnership, alignment, and collaboration. The third kind of energy is called spiritual energy. And this is the kind of energy that is about, connecting to our deeper purpose. It's about, linking to the future, the shared future that we want, the sense of possibility. And it's about hope, optimism, enabling people to feel ready and confident to move forward into the future. And the last kind of energy, again, very, very important, physical energy. Okay? This is the energy of doing, implementing, action, getting things done. Okay? So tell you what we'll do a straw poll now, because we like doing this for energies. We're obviously very good at it. Right? So, which kind of energy is most prevalent, do you think, in your organisation? Okay? You can just pick one. So we'll start from the bottom up this time. Okay? Who thinks that in your organisation the most prevalent energy is physical energy? Okay? Energy of getting things done. Okay? Few of you. Who thinks the most prevalent energy is spiritual energy? The sense of possibility, hopeful future. Okay? Nobody. Okay? One. Okay? Who thinks the most prevalent energy in their organisation is emotional energy? Okay? Good. Very good. About a third of you. Who thinks that the most prevalent energy is intellectual energy? Okay? About 2/3 of you. Okay? That would be, if you did that actually with a group in England, it would be exactly the same outcome. Okay? And it's a problem. Because, when I look across the NHS in England, the most prevalent energy is intellectual energy. This is our large-scale change plan. Okay? And this is what we're going to do. And, what's even worse, what I see certainly time and time again in my system, is this mixture, okay, of over-focus on intellectual energy with over-focus on physical energy. And it's like, this is the cost and quality plan, right, go and do it now, boom, go. And often we talk about change fatigue. We talk about people who were just running out of energy for change, we're so fatigued, change overload, okay? And what you see time and time again is when people talk in those terms, it's that combination of over-focus on intellectual energy and physical energy. And across our system, we have this tendency. And the problem with just intellectual energy is important, we need it. But when we've got an over-focus of it and an under-focus on the other energies, it keeps us in our comfort zone, It isn't transformational, okay? Nobody has changed the world with an over-focus on intellectual energy. And actually, we will achieve greater results at scale and pace if we can link, obviously, keeping that strength in intellectual energy, but linking it with physical energy, emotional and spiritual energy. And, my world's changed, because 18 months ago, I wouldn't dare to talk about spiritual energy. They just think, what planet's she off? But now it's changing. People are getting it. We're understanding, we've got to link to bigger purpose. And it's interesting for me because, I love the National Health Service in England. I love what it stands for. I would die the most gruesome death fighting for it. But when you go back to the beginning of our system, like in 1948, like what the NHS stood for, what it was set up for, it is so driven by spiritual energy. And this is my namesake, no relation, Helen Bevan, who founded the NHS. And, when you listen to what he was saying at the time, society becomes more wholesome, more serene and spiritually healthier if it knows that its citizens have at the back of their consciousness the knowledge that not only themselves but all their fellows have access when ill to the best that medical skill can provide. you know? And in a sense, what we have to do in our system is to connect back, okay, with those spiritual ideas, because I think it's such an energy for change. Now, leadership styles really matter in this. And I just want to show you some work from England around our top leadership. And we've had some big issues in our system about talent management, because we spend a lot of money on leadership development, okay? But what happens is when it comes to the really big top chief exec jobs that get advertised in England, we don't get many applicants, you know? I mean, I can really understand why people think those jobs are really tough, because they are really, really big jobs. But in a sense, you know, we've got a problem of talent management with top leaders. So the chief exec of the NHS, David Nicholson, set up a year ago a top leaders programme. Okay? And again, we're a very big system, you know, 1.4 million people, 25,000 senior leaders. So what he did and the team did was to identify the 800 top managers in the National Health Service in England to come and be on this top leadership, top management programme. Okay? And as a result of that, these leaders have been going through an assessment of leadership style. And this is one of the models that we've been using. It comes from Hay, okay, which is a HR leadership development company, and it's their assessment. And each of these leaders is going through this process with a 360-degree assessment and what's our leadership style. And basically what you can see here, that there are 6 different leadership styles. And clearly what you'd want from your leaders, clinical and managerial, are people who can operate with all 6 styles and who can switch between them, you know, according to what's required. Okay? Now, one of the things that Don Berwick says is every system, okay, is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So what do you think, in terms of the NHS in England, okay, after 13 years of top-down targets, okay, which one do you think is really, really prevalent and that is a problem? It's not directive, actually. It's interesting. It's another one. I'll show you. Pace setting. Okay? Pace setting leaders are leaders who lead from the front and they say, right, we've got to deliver this goal. Right, I'm here. I'm going to show you how to do it. Follow my example. And, you know, pace setting leaders don't tend to be developmental. They don't tend to be participative. It's like, watch me and follow me. And I get the difference as a directive leader would be somebody who says, you do this, you do that. Pace setter leader is quite different. It's like, lead from the front and follow me. And the situation that we have, you know, is that because we've been doing what we've been doing, you know, delivering lots of external targets, it's kind of created that leadership approach. And it's a problem because actually when we look to the future and the kind of system that we need, that is about whole communities coming together, it's about much closer collaboration between local government and the healthcare system, health and social care. It's about different relationships between primary and secondary care. You know, pace setter leaders, okay, don't typically work in that way. Another part of this is that for 57% of our top leaders, okay, their workforce reported back that they created a work climate that was demoralising. Okay, 57%. Only 10% of the leaders got an assessment of being inspirational. And when you think, you know, we stand back and we look at the bigger evidence around large-scale change and the extent to which we have to build energy for large-scale change, there's a real sense in our country of a mismatch between the kind of leadership community that we've created and what's needed for the future. And again, big focus going forward around developing leadership styles. But you know, one thing I would say is that leaders in our system are, I mean, A, they're really talented, and B, you know, they're very capable of change. And I think everybody recognises that it has to change, and I think it will change. And again, this is another quote from Lewin and Schwartz. You know, as leaders, okay, and particularly as pace setter leaders in our system, we hold ourselves accountable for the way that we manage our time and our money. But we have to learn to hold ourselves at least equally accountable for how we manage our energy. Because we need to do that if we're going to deliver large-scale change, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So, you know, thinking about those 4 energies is a really good language for what's going on in our organisations. So, you know, if you're working on you know, a big quality improvement project and one of your colleagues is getting over intellectual, you know, challenge them. You know, think about it. Now, one of the things I would absolutely recommend is to use one of the tools or approaches that is available around assessing energy in your team or your organisation. And there's lots of different ones. So this one here, again, is from Stanton Maris. And they tend to be much of a muchness, okay? They help you to analyse your own energy. And you nearly always get these 2 dimensions. They might be described in slightly different ways, but they're the same thing. So, like, the first dimension is how much energy is there, okay? To what extent is there lots of energy happening in my team or my organisation and my system? And then the second dimension is how focused is that energy? You know, to what extent is it aligned with the goals? You know, to what extent have we got a shared purpose? I'm going to show you now another one, but I wanted to show you some different ones because there's a lot of them around, and we've worked with all of them. This one comes from Bruce and Vogel, and again, it's the same thing. Okay, they talk. They use a slightly different language. They talk about intensity. Okay, and the intensity is like how much energy is there? To what extent has the organisation and leaders activated its emotional, intellectual, and behavioural potential? Okay, and then the other dimension they call quality. And again, same thing as with the Stanton Maris assessment, the extent to which that energy is focused on and aligned with the goals and the purpose of the organisation. And this is a matrix, okay, that Bruce and Vogel use. And there's like, you know, 4 different states of energy. And it's really worth thinking about your organisation and your team and what state of energy you're in. Because obviously, if you've got, you know, low intensity, not very much energy, and it isn't focused on the goals of the organisation, I think we have a bit of a problem. Okay, we'd call that resigned inertia, like nothing is happening, we're shut down. Very often, and I'm going to come back to this in a moment, we see this a lot in healthcare, where there's actually a lot of energy around, but it isn't focused or aligned with the goals of the organisation, and we call that corrosive energy. Okay, more on that. Very often as well, we see a situation where we call it comfortable energy, and that's where you've got an organisation that's done really well in the past, okay, or a team. So we're like sat on our laurels. So while the energy is very aligned with the organisation and where it's trying to go, there's actually not very much energy. So what are some of the things that we need to think about? Tell you what we'll do. We'll stop for 2 minutes, okay, have a think about your team or organisation. You know, where are you? Which box are you in? Okay, have a 2-minute conversation. Your team is in one of these boxes. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to tell you about some of the traps that we fall in and why we end up in these boxes and what we can do about it. So let's start off. I'm not going to ask you to say which box you're in, so don't worry. You know, for those of you who might be in the comfortable energy box, and there's a trap that teams fall into here, which is called the complacency trap. And this is about teams, organisations that, you know, up until now have been really successful and have done really well. So we're sitting on our laurels a bit, you know. And, you know, we're complacent, we're inert, and we don't want to look at what anybody else is doing because nobody could do it as well as us, okay? And we're like, because we're lulled by our success, we stop looking outside, we stop questioning, and we lose our alertness, we lose our passion, and we lose our readiness, okay? And instead, we get overly satisfied, lazy, or arrogant. I'm sure that never happens in BC. Okay, so what can we do about it? Now, what Bruce and Vogel say is what we've got to do is that when we're getting over comfortable in our energy, what we need to do is we either need to identify a threat to the organisation, like if we don't take action now, a really bad thing's going to happen, or it's an opportunity. There's this phenomenal opportunity that we need to create. But by either, it's about creating a common sense of urgency. You know, we need to put some more urgency into the situation. You know, and what we've got to be able to do across the board is to strengthen the confidence that the organisation can either deal with the threat or rise to the opportunity. Okay. Now, what's interesting, Bruce and Vogel, the way that they set things out, they say either focus on a threat, and they call it slaying the dragon, okay, or define an opportunity, which they talk about in terms of rescuing princesses. And it's interesting, because for me, see, I don't think, from my experience, that it's like either a threat or an opportunity. Because actually, I think it's about creating that sense of urgency by talking about, this action we need to take. If we don't take action now, really bad things will happen. But if we do take action, this is the nature of the opportunity. But key to escaping this complacency trap is creating energy, okay, around either a threat or an opportunity. Okay? The next one is the corrosion trap. I see this very much in my system in England, but again, I'm sure it doesn't happen in BC. Where what happens is, the underlying energy that should be going into doing positive things for our patients, for our communities, it gets eaten away either by negative competition between divisions or units or different parts of the system, or within senior leadership teams or other leadership teams, internal rivalries and corrosive relationships. And what it means, that discretionary effort, that 30 or 40% extra work that people will do, and the kind of broader capabilities, okay, all that human potential for change, okay, and the higher agenda that we're trying to achieve doesn't get directed towards that change effort, and it is a human tragedy. So what should we be doing? Okay? What Bruce and Vogel says, we take this in 2 phases. The first phase is about getting rid of the negativity. So we have to name it. Okay? We have to, elephant in the room. Sometimes when I've done this in Canada, we talk about the moose on the table. Okay? But it's the same thing. Okay? Like the thing that's there, the issue, relationship, we have to name them. And another technique that they suggest is called destructive brainstorming. And what we mean there is, normally we brainstorm creatively and we say, these are all the great things that we could do. Actually, with destructive brainstorming, we take it the other way. And we say, if we carry on like this, these are all the really bad things that could happen. Also, what we find in organisations, and I've certainly seen this in all the organisations that I work with, you've got a few people, okay, really important people, and they're what are called the toxic handlers, okay? And they're the people in the team or in the organisation that actually kind of manage the relationship and keep it moving forward despite all the, all the kind of corrosive energy. And those people are really important. So we identify them and we get them to play their role even more importantly. And again, phase 2 goes back to this issue about higher purpose. What's the deeper meaning? What's our shared purpose? Refocusing our joint goals, creating a collective commitment, focusing on our pride in the organisation. Number 3, and I know there's some issues around this, is the acceleration trap, where, let's do another improvement project. And, what we're actually doing is, there's lots of energy, it's great, but we're initiating too many activities. The local projects that we're doing aren't connected to the bigger goals of the organisation, that we're not creating a sense of meaning in the change that we're doing, and people are left exhausted and highly stressed by change, okay? And again, I think this correlates with the idea of the intellectual energy and the physical energy. And the likely result is that we don't achieve our goals. And it's hard to sustain the change because we're just doing too much. So what do we do about the acceleration trap? Okay? The first thing we do is we detect the acceleration. So we sit down and we work out what kind of acceleration is there. And basically there's 3 different kinds. Okay? The first one is overloading. There's just too much to do. Okay? Just the sheer volume of activity. The next one is the multi-loading, the complexity. There's just too many different things to do. And the third one is perpetual loading, which is you're asking people to just keep doing very monotonous things that don't inspire, that don't move things forward. So what do we need to do? Okay? We need to stop the action. As leaders, we need to kind of get off the hamster wheel. We need to stand back. Okay? Ask teams what we can stop doing. We're always talking about innovation, the importance of innovation. Well, here we need to do some reverse innovation, okay? To say, let's think creatively, okay, about what we're going to stop doing. And we initiate spring cleaning, and we don't have to wait till spring, okay? We can stand back and look at the whole range of things we're doing, and we should keep spring cleaning, okay? That we need to put systems into place, okay? Around, again, it's when we talked about the 4 Cs. We've got to have really good systems for prioritising and managing projects. Okay? Take time out, stand back and look at what we're doing. Often we've got to slow down to speed up, do less more thoroughly. And we've got to build the feedback systems in so we're getting the warnings where this is happening. So, you know, even where we have productive energy now and it's fantastic, we have to sustain it for the long haul. Okay? The journey that we are on now in change with quality and cost improvement is a long-term journey, and we need to manage it. So what should we do? We need to talk about energy. Okay? We need to see energy as a thing as much as we see resources or time. You know, I would absolutely recommend assessing and benchmarking energy. And I know that some of you here have been using the Bruce and Vogel tool and have enjoyed doing that. And you know, you can use Bruce and Vogel. You can just download it. You can use Stanton Maris. There's lots of other ways of doing it. But you know, I would recommend using a tool to assess and benchmark your energy. Not because it's a highly scientific process with lots of intellectual energy. Actually, because it enables you to have a different conversation with each other. Okay? Set some goals around, you know, how you're going to leverage your energy. Okay? How you're going to make the most of it. Role model within your own team. Because you see, as leaders, okay, we are signal generators. It means the things that we do every day send signals out to the organisation about what's important. And as leaders, we're consistently underestimating the amplification effect of our actions. Okay? So if we, like each of us, okay, start to role model, okay, we stand up against the corrosiveness. Okay? We stand up against the acceleration. And again, and as senior leadership teams, showing that you value the overall purpose of the organisation above your own agenda, being a personal role model of that, so important. Okay? Mobilize, okay, around your distinctive challenges and opportunities, okay, to overcome that comfortable energy. Forcefully cut corrosion, you know, stand up, sort those mooses out. Okay? Decelerate it where it's needed and think about how we can build energized leaders. And this is a quote from Henry Mintzberg. And he says, you know, leadership is not about making clever decisions and doing bigger deals. It is about helping to release the positive energy that exists naturally within people, okay? Within our workforce, within our service users, within our communities. And I'd say that where we stand now, okay, and the quality and the safety and the cost challenges that are in front of us, there's never been a time in the history of healthcare where this perspective is more pertinent. Just a couple of things to end. That, you know, when we think about energy and we think about the physiological approach to change, it's not enough on its own. You know, we've got to integrate this in with our broader change work. And what's happening in the NHS in England is that we're going to have one change model for the NHS, okay? And we're all going to use this, okay? And it's kind of work in progress, but I want to show you this. So every change initiative we're doing in the NHS, we're thinking about have we built these 8 components in all of them. And, you know, it starts, again, with that very energy-focused, connect the change process to a higher purpose. Too often, we initiate change and we're not connecting it to what we're trying to do. You see, really, in England, when we talk about our activities to improve quality and reduce cost, that's not really what it's about. Okay? What it's really about is actually securing the future of the NHS system as a free, comprehensive healthcare system. Okay? That's what this is about. Then, you know, we've got these components going along here, which are, to me, are about creating the conditions for change. You know, build leadership skills for transformation. Big energy component in that. Engage and mobilize people for change at scale. Whether we're talking about people that use our services, families, communities, our workforce. Design for the spread of innovation. It won't just happen. And then this is a bit complicated, but I'll tell you what it means. Align the change process with changes in the drivers of system behaviour. Because, you know, what we do all the time is we're always changing the incentive systems, the payment systems, the operating rules. And we do that typically completely separately from other aspects of improvement. And we've got to combine them all. We need to be utilising quality improvement methodologies that are based on evidence. And we're not specifying what it is. So it could be Lean, it could be Six Sigma, it could be the Institute for Healthcare Improvement model for improvement, it could be the NHS Institute model for large-scale change. But we know, evidence tells us that actually if we work in that systematic way, it makes a difference. Harnessing the power of measurement and transparency. And, you know, guess what? We have to do the anatomical stuff and we have to do the intellectual energy. So we have to underpin our change efforts by an approach to performance and programme management that is effective. And next time you see it, it's going to look different because it's all being, actually tomorrow, the new version of it's coming out. And it's kind of watch this space on this one. But I wanted to show it to you because, you know, change won't just happen because people do bits of things. We've got to take things to the next stage. We've got to get systematic, and we've got to build energy and physiological aspects of change right at the heart of our approach to large-scale change. I'm nearly finished. So, you know, kind of the ideas underpinning this, okay? One of the kind of key ideas around this is that if we want to mobilise people for change, if we want every person, okay, to play their part in change, what we have to do is we have to connect with emotions, and the way that we do that is through values. You know, when I went to improvement school in the NHS, which was a long time ago, what I was taught is if you want to get a doctor, you know, a medical doctor involved in change, you have to show them a graph, okay? Because, you know, medical doctors, okay, will only be swayed to change because they see some statistical evidence. And you know, it's wrong. It's not true. Okay, even medical doctors, okay, are far, I know, there's lots of great ones here, yeah, you know, are far more likely to be influenced to change because we connect with emotion through values than because we show data. Obviously, if we can show data in a really compelling way that makes an emotional connection and puts a message across, but is statistically grounded, it's bingo, you know? But this is what we need to think about. And what I'd say is, if we look at the history of large-scale change, you know, if we look at those leaders who often had no formal resources for change, okay, who had no power for change, weren't in a hierarchy, and yet were able to take action, often as leaders of social movements, community organisers, were actually able to change the world. You know, what did they do? Okay, they made these kind of connections, you know, they ignited energy. And the way that they did that is by telling stories. And telling stories is such a key way of building energy. And, you know, one aspect of that is about patient stories. You know, patient stories and making, again, that connection with emotions and values is really important. But patient stories aren't enough. We've got to be able to tell our own stories, okay? And as leaders, we have to learn to tell our own stories because that is the way to unlock much of this energy for change. And the reason that we need to do that is because if we want people to join our cause of change, then people will do it on the basis of values. You know, if you hear my values, and my values connect with your values, then we start to create a sense of us rather than us and them. And when we tell our own stories and we get across our own experiences, people hear our values in those stories, okay? And when it comes to building energy for change, when it comes to building a movement for change in our own organisations and systems, you know, telling our own stories is a really powerful way of doing that. So what I thought I should do is I've talked to you about role modelling and amplification. So I should probably end by role modelling and demonstrating this. So I was going to tell you a story about me. So here we go. Right, who's that? Can you see the likeness? It's my dad, okay? This is my dad. He's called Beven, and he's 83 years young. And he is a very frequent user of health systems in England. And the thing about my dad was that he grew up during the Second World War. And what happened in England during the Second World War was because there weren't very many kind of resources around for education, that all the kids in school went from changed from going to school all day to just going to school for half a day. And then again, you know, my dad left school in 1942. So, you know, at the kind of heart of resource difficulties in England at the time. So my dad was meant to leave school when he was 14, but the Christmas when he was still 13, he was basically told, "You've got to leave school this week, okay? Because we're allowing all the 13-year-olds, or we're compelling all the 13-year-olds to leave school early. So you're leaving next week." So my dad's granddad, who worked in shipping, had a friend who was a sail maker, you know, made sails for ships. So he took, my dad had no choice, so my 13-year-old father was taken round to this guy's sail loft and became an apprentice sailmaker at the age of 13, and only stopped working when he was 78. So that's where I get my work ethic genes from. Anyway, what's been really interesting recently is that we've started to look at the history of my family. And here we have the Bevens, okay? So there's me at the bottom, and then my dad, Mervyn, and then kind of going up. Now, what's interesting about my family is that the consistency, okay? Because every generation, going right the way back, more than 200 years, have lived within 2 miles of each other, okay? And when you look at the jobs they did, it's even more consistent, okay? Because like everybody in my family, you know, did something that was within a 2-mile radius in Bristol, and they all did the same kind of job. And my dad was absolutely thrilled to find out that Stephen Bevan, his great-great-grandfather, was also a sailmaker. So, you know, when I looked at this, and I was talking to my friend about it, and I said, well, I feel kind of really sad about this because, you know, like every generation's been so kind of consistent. And you know, it's interesting because, like, when I see other people, I mean, they've got, like, really exotic families who, like, got sent as convicts to Australia. Or, you know, or, like, defrocked vicars. And we're so consistent, you know? And yeah, I did feel sad because I said, like, every generation's done the same. And our generation, like, none of us, okay, you know, are keeping up with that family tradition and doing the same thing. And my friend said to me, you know, Helen, just hang on a minute. Like, think about what you do. And, you know, kind of standing back and thinking about it, when you think about change, when we think about energy for change and the kind of role that I have in the National Health Service in England about mobilising people for change, you know, too often we think about change in a very kind of top-down way. We know we need to drive change through the system. But actually, you know, if we can create the wind in the sails, you know, if we can ignite that incredible energy for change that is there, that's there in our workforce, that's there in our service users, that's there in our communities, we don't need to drive anything. So my friend said to me, actually, Helen, you know, there's one thing you need to recognise. You know? I said, yeah, you're a sailmaker too. So I'm really pleased to be keeping the family tradition moving forward. So I hope, you know, that's given you some ideas, some tools, some things to think about. But there's phenomenal energy in this room. And I think if all of us can be those leaders of energy, you know, can be those sources of hope and possibility and different future, you know, we really can change the world. So thank you.